Hi, distance learners. I hope you guys are doing well. I want to walk you through today a little bit about how to cite text evidence, a little bit more specifically than we've talked about in the past. Today, we're not going to be talking about how to select evidence or why selecting evidence is important, but we are going to be talking about how we should specifically format text evidence when we use it in a story or an essay or an answer to a question. Specifically, just to cover our bases a little bit, using text evidence is important because it essentially provides our readers of our answers with our questions proof that we understood the text that we're reading and that the answers that we're giving are not things we're making up, but or are in our own imagination. Text evidence and having the ability to reference things beyond our own guesses and answers is an incredibly important skill in almost any career that you will choose to have. It's really important that we appeal to and use sources and resources from opinions above us so that we can give factual and correct answers, especially in science and math and business and office related careers. All right, so whenever we are citing English and text evidence in English class, there's a specific format in a way that I want this done. Let me walk you through a couple examples. As you can see on the screen, I'll zoom in a little bit. There are in-text citations that I call, or that are called the author page style. There are three different ways that you can do this. The first way is by using a direct quote from the text that you're going to be referencing. So I'll read this example. Wordsworth, who is the author, stated that romantic poetry was marked by a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. End quote. And then we have in parentheses the page number specifically. Sorry for the interruption. You're going to need to include the page number in the parentheses at the end with a period following. As you can see right here in the second example, we also have a direct quote. However, there is one thing that's different. In this case, on the second example, the author's name, or specifically their last name, is included within the parentheses or the citation itself. In the first example, we stated the author's name and included that in our embedding or our own words to lead into the quote. In this case here, we included the author's name before the page number in the citation. It's really important that whichever one we choose to use, we need to include the author's last name. If we look at the third example, this one doesn't have quotation marks at all. This one has a paraphrase. For those of you who may or may not remember, a paraphrase is putting the words of someone else into our own words. This one may not have a quote, however, it does have the words, or the idea of the one, something from Wordsworth's poem. It has his name and it has the page number. So Wordsworth extensively explored the role of emotion in the creative process as a paraphrase, putting his own ideas into our own words. So it's not our idea, so we need to cite and give him credit for those things. So we have his name, we have his idea, sort of the quote, we have the page number. Whichever one we're doing, we always need to have three things. We need to have the author's last name, the quote, and the page number. All right, let's look at a couple examples of how we can format these, and I want to walk you through some examples that may or may not be good. So let's look at this first one. It says, Miss Van's autobiography stated that her favorite class is the one that is funny and follows the rules. End quote and citation page number. Whenever we're looking at an in-text citation, there are three general things we need to make sure we have. The first thing is the author's name. The second is the page or line number. And the third is the idea or the quote that we're citing or referring to. In this case here, let's look and see if we have those three things. So we know an autobiography is a story about that person's life written by the person whose life it's discussing. So if it's referring to Ms. Van's autobiography, Ms. Van had to have been the one who wrote it, in which case Ms. Van is the author. So Ms. Van, the author, check, we've got the author. Then we have the page number, 14. And then we have our quotation marks. Our quotation marks are here, and they're in the right spots. They're before the parentheses, and the period is also in the right spot at the end of the screen, at the end of the sentence. So this one is good. It has everything it needs to have. All right, let's look at another example. In this one right here, it says, the author states, I never realized the importance of not handing my mom the phone when looking at the picture. In this one here, we have 3 things that we need to look for. Let's look at our list. So I do see quotation marks, and they look okay. They look fine. We've embedded our quote. We have something leading into it here, so that's good. However, if we remember our 3 things, we need to have the author's name, the page number, and the quotation marks. So we may have the quotation marks, but we have 2 things that are missing here. In this case, it's the author's name. It does say the author states, but it doesn't say the author's name. So we need to add a citation at the end of this to refer to the author's name. So let's just pretend that I also wrote this based on the last example. So we'd put my last name, which is Van, and we have the author's name now. Good. We have a quote, we have the author's name. However, there's something else that we are still missing. Can you think what it is? If you said page number, you are correct. So we need to put a page number here. We need to refer to specifically where we got this quote from. So we know the author's name, his last name is Van. We have the page number. And there's one last thing we need to put right here at the end of our citation. If you said period, you got it. That is correct. All right, let's do one last example. And I'm going to walk you through how to do your assignment for today. All right, let's look at this example right here. I hope the lunch for today is not pizza, stated 4th period in their autobiography. All right, this one's a little tricky. So we start out with quotation marks. Remember, whenever we have quotation marks, we also need to add our own words to lead into those quotation marks. That's called embedding a quote. We need to add something either before or after in order to make sure that we're not just only putting a quote in there, because that is not a fully or properly embedded in-text citation. In this case here, let's look at this one. If we're looking at another autobiography, an autobiography has to be written by the person whose life the story is. So in this case here, 4th period, it's their autobiography. So if 4th period, it's their autobiography, 4th period, that class must have written it. So we have the author's name here, but the author's name is included in the quotation marks. That doesn't sound right. So we have to go back and look at the part that they specifically said. If we go back and look, this makes me suspicious of this quotation mark being right here. I don't think that's quite right. So let's read it again. I hope the lunch for today is not pizza, stated 4th period in their autobiography. Can you tell what needs to be fixed based off of how I read it and what you know about how to use quotes? If you said we need to move the quotation marks to here, congratulations, you got it right. The quotation marks do not need to be here. So let's look at our checklist. We need to have the author's name, we need to have the quotes, and we need to have the page number. So let's start at the bottom. We have the page number. That looks correct. We've got our parentheses and our period. We moved our quotes around, so they're actually properly formatted. That's good. And we have, now that we've moved our quotes and fixed it, we have the embedding, the words that we added to make the full quote make sense. This part right here where it says stated 4th period in their autobiography. So now we have our in-text citation, our embedding, our author's name, which is 4th period, and the page number. So we have everything that we need to have for this in-text citation to be correct. All right. Let's look at how we're going to do our assignment for today. So for our assignment, we have to answer a few questions about our story for this week called The Monkey's Paw. It's a pretty fun/sad story. In this case here, I'm going to walk you through how you're going to format your answers. So you're going to be, in our class in person, we're reading a different book and stories than the online students are reading. So some of these questions are referring to that. However, the example works perfectly for it. So in our answers, we're going to have a question that specifically asks us something about the story or the poem or whatever it is that we're reading whenever we're using text evidence. In this case here, this example question asks, how is Morgan Crow, one of the characters in our book, described in Nevermore, which is the name of our book? So we have our question here. So we need to format our answers in 3 sentences. We're only going to have 3 sentences. In the first sentence, we're going to simply answer the question. So, Morrigan in the novel Nevermore by Jessica Townsend is described as having pale skin and black hair. Ta-da! There is our answer. However, it's not good enough to just give an answer. So now we need to put our text evidence. So remember, when we use text evidence, we add our own words to the start. We need to embed it. So let's look here. It says, the text states, Morrigan's stepmother didn't look like she belonged at Crow Manor. Her spun gold hair and sun-kissed skin were out of place among the midnight black hair and pale, sickly complexions of the Crow family. Crows never tanned. Here we have our author's last name and the page number this came from. Ta-da! We have our page, we have our author's name, we have our page numbers, and our in-text citation or our text is properly formatted. We have all three things we need. All right, and then for the third sentence, what we're going to do is briefly explain how that text evidence answers this question. So this is what I said. This quote shows that Morrigan is pale and has black hair. As you can see, I put quotation marks around the words that I took from the above quote. All right, so when you start answering your questions for your assignment, you need to follow this format. Sentence number 1 should answer the question. Sentence 2 should provide text evidence from the story that helps you support your answer. Sentence 3 should briefly explain how that text evidence you cited helps explain the answer. So the questions for our assignment, the format is also listed on here, along with the example again broken up so you can see it. Your questions, you only have 3 that you need to format this way, which is a total of 9 sentences. So question number 1, why is there a spell on the paw? So in the story, The Monkey's Paw, make sure if you haven't read it, you do need to read this before that. It's linked on Monday's assignments. You will, number 1, or in sentence number 1 for your answer the question. In sentence number 2, you'll give text evidence, properly formatted, like I showed you in the 3 examples at the start of the video. And then in sentence 3, you'll briefly explain how that text evidence you cited proves your answer. So you're going to type your answers all into these text boxes. There are only 3 questions. All right, that's your assignment for today and some instructions on how to complete it. If you need help or have any questions, let me know.